Thank you very much for that introduction. Can you hear me back there? Yes, excellent. Okay, well, I'm delighted to be here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is your creative brain. But right now, I just feel like kind of floating someplace. So, as coaches, one of the things that you have to do right away, if you're going to teach your clients about creativity, is to make them understand why creativity is so important. In corporate America and also in the healthcare industry, I don't think enough attention is given to creativity, and yet creativity is one of our most important assets as human beings. In fact, I believe that creativity is our survival mechanism as a species. If you think back in evolutionary time, for our ancestors, they weren't fast enough to outrun predators or strong enough to fight them off. The way that we have survived across centuries as a species is through our own human ingenuity. Creativity is also our long-distance communication mechanism. It allows us to communicate with each other across centuries, across continents, and across ideologies, something of the human experience, something of what it means to be human. And I've related this story many times because it's really touching to me, but my son, when he was in high school, he played football, and he had a number of his fellow football players over one afternoon before they were going to a party. And they decided to go out in the yard, throw the ball around, and of course they ended up getting so dirty that they couldn't go to the party unless I washed their clothes. So as I'm washing their pants, I'm going through the pockets of which you have to do with teenage boys, or you end up washing chewing gum, dollar bills, heaven knows what else. And I pulled out this dog-eared piece of paper, and on it was a poem by Emily Dickinson. And it had clearly been read and reread. And I thought about this. What was it that this diminutive woman from 2 centuries ago, dressed in white, would have to say to this big, hulking, 16-year-old, not-so-bright football player? And you know, I'll never really know exactly what it was, but what I do know is that all of us have our Emily Dickinson poem. We've all got a piece of music, a poem, a work of art that has said something to us, that has spoken to us across time, across ideologies, and across continents. So creativity is the way we communicate with each other. To say nothing of the enrichment and comfort that other people's creativity has given to us, from medical miracles to computers, to our transportation, to works of art, and to beautiful pieces of music. But it's also important to know that our own creativity is important in our lives. Creativity is also the way we are going to navigate through the rapid change climate of the 21st century. And for those of you who are leadership coaches, it's really important to know that today everything is in flux. The roadmaps that we used to use to guide us through virtually every aspect of life are no longer valid. The rules are changing right in the middle of the game. And if you're not adaptable and creative, you're going to fall behind and certainly have no chance of having a say-so in what the future looks like. Creativity is not just for artists and scientists and musicians and writers. Creativity is necessary in all aspects of our life. From the way that you comfort a child whose feelings have been hurt, to the way you lead your corporation. In fact, creativity is so important in business that business schools, all of the elite business schools in the United States, now have courses in creativity, which they didn't only about 10 or 15 years ago. A recent study that was done by IBM indicated that creativity was the most sought after trait for CEOs. And in fact, it turns out that most Fortune 500 companies have a chief innovation and creativity officer. Here's a story that's a little bit disturbing to me. Last year, I was asked to give a talk at the American Mystery Writers of America have a New England meeting, which they call the New England Crime Bake, which I think is kind of cute. But I was giving a talk there, and afterwards I was talking to this wannabe mystery writer. And I said, well, what is your current job? And she said, well, I've just retired from my position as Chief Innovation Officer for the IRS. And I'm like, this is not what we need. We need creativity in our lives, but not from the IRS, right? So anyway, I just want you to know how important creativity is in business and how sought after it is. And if your clients are stuck in this corporate mentality where they think that reason and rational behavior is the most sought after trait, in fact, it's not. Creativity and vision is. Creativity is also important for those of you who are in the physical and mental health industries. When we look at the toll that stress takes on our lives, there's a lot of new research that suggests that creative activity can actually balance out stress. In a recent study that was done by Gene Cohen that looked at senior citizens, those who had participated in 2 years of creative activities had less doctor visits, were able to reduce their medication, and had overall higher levels of physical well-being than those who did not participate in creative activity. Creative activity is also a wonderful way to manage mood. And in fact, in the psychology department at Harvard where I work, if we want to do studies where we're manipulating people's mood, one of the ways we do it is by showing them creative things such as video clips from movies or else playing music. Music is a fantastic mood regulator, and playing music and writing music is as well. Obviously, there are a number of different therapies, from art therapy to writing therapy to music therapy, that are used as adjuncts to standard therapies for depression and anxiety disorders. And this also attests to the efficacy of using creative activity to regulate mood. There have been a couple of recent studies that have also indicated that engaging in creative activity can help with immune functioning. In 2 different studies that have recently come out, either writing poetry or just imagining, using the imagination, both brought down levels of cortisol significantly more than control groups who weren't engaged in creative activity. And finally, one of the reasons that creativity is so important in managing health and mood regulation is that it helps us to make sense of our world. It helps us to find meaning in situations that otherwise might not be meaningful. So for instance, one of the things I do when I'm not doing research or teaching is I work with the Department of Defense on a therapy, an online therapy for our troops that are returning from Iraq and Afghanistan. And one of the things that we found is people who've been exposed to traumatic events, when they can engage in creative activity, whether it is writing or art or music, it helps them to make sense of their experience. So creativity and creative activity are very important in the health field as well as in the business field. And if your clients need any more incentive to increase their creative capacities, and we all have natural capacities, then you can remind them of the recent studies that indicate people who are creative are more sexually attractive and find more sexual mates than those who are less creative. This is a bowerbird, and you may be familiar with the bowerbird, who collects very colorful, assorted items and makes a very creative nest to attract a mate. A recent research that was done by Jeff Miller and David Nettle also indicate that of the traits that people are looking for in long-term mates, that creativity ranked 3rd, after only kindness and sociability. And it ranked even higher than wealth. for a long-term mate. Now, most of the studies were done with college undergraduates, so, you know, what do they know, right? But there has to be something to this sexual attractiveness, or why would anybody find this man attractive? Sorry, Mick. Okay, so for all these reasons, you can convince your clients that enhancing their own creativity is important. It is our survival mechanism as a species. It's our long-distance communication mechanism. It is our means of thriving in the rapid change 21st century. And it's a way that we can enrich both ourselves and those around us. And finally, it allows for emotional regulation, inspiration, stress management, and mental and physical health. So why is creativity important in coaching? Well, the value basically is to deliver creative insights to the people that you work with. Very often the people that come to you, they have problems, they have difficulties, they're not exactly sure where they're going wrong. And your ability to help them reach these insights through creative thinking is one of your goals. Also helps clients to get out of ruts and to help them see, to help them envision not just who they are, but who they can be. We definitely want to help our clients see the work they're doing and their personal lives from a different perspective. And this idea of multiple perspective taking is one of the cornerstones of creative ideation. So what I'm hoping is that you will look at creativity on 3 levels. The first thing you want to do is to become more creative as a person yourself. That will allow you to become more creative as a coach, and in turn will allow you to help your clients become more creative. So what exactly is creativity? And there seems to be, this is a kind of nebulous term. People aren't exactly sure what falls under this topic of creativity. So I'm first going to give you a couple of unscientific definitions of creativity because these are definitions that I love. The first is that creativity is the attempt to mold a sense of order out of chaos. And what I want you to do is think of the creative individual basically as a mythical hero. What the creative person does is they gather knowledge from the known world. Those of you that are familiar with Joseph Campbell and the mythical hero will understand the elements of this analogy. And then they walk into chaos, or the unknown world. They go to a place where understanding or bits of information aren't organized in any way that we can make sense of them. And they do battle with this. And then they bring home, usually in mythical lore, this is doing battle with a dragon. And then they come back into the kingdom or the known world, bringing something with them. Very often the dragon's heart, but in our case, a creative act, a creative idea, or a creative product that in turn enriches the known world and expands it. So the creative individual is a hero because creativity is a messy process. We'll be talking about the process in a minute, but you have to be uncomfortable with uncertainty, and helping your clients learn to be uncomfortable with uncertainty is a big aspect of teaching them to be more creative. I teach a course at Harvard called Creativity, Madmen, Geniuses, and Harvard Students. And the reason that's the name of the course is I actually came to the study of creativity through my training as a psychopathologist. So I'm a psychopathologist by training, and I became very fascinated with the number of stories of highly creative luminaries that have really suffered from inner demons. And I don't want you to think by any means that because there is some correlation between creativity and risk for certain mental illnesses, that enhancing your creativity or that of your clients is going to lead to mental illness. That isn't the case at all. And I wish I had time to talk about creativity and mental illness and why there's a correlation, but that's another talk. But anyway, in my course, I ask every student to give me a definition of creativity before I tell them what the working definition is. And this is one that I really loved. Creativity is capitalizing on failure. One of the things that creative people know is that failure is part of the process. Failure is not something to fear. Failure is not something to be anxious about. If you're going to succeed, you have to have failed multiple times along the way. And so helping clients to get a new perspective on failure is an important part of enhancing their creativity as well. Now for the actual definition of creativity. And most researchers who deal in the field of creativity have focused on these two elements. First of all, for an act, an idea, or a product to be creative, it has to be original or novel. Duh. The second part is that it has to be useful, adaptive, or serve a purpose in some way. So this is an important aspect, and people become very confused about this. What's adaptive about art? What purpose does it serve? And remember, as I mentioned earlier, art is one way that we communicate with each other, long distance. And so that is an adaptable aspect of art. My personal definition of creativity is this. It's the ability to take bits of information, whether from your unique repository of knowledge, memories, and skills, or from external stimuli that's coming in through your senses, and combine and recombine these bits of information to form novel, original, and adaptive ideas and products. This is the definition of creativity. It's being able to take bits of information or stimuli, combine them and recombine them in novel and original ways that serve a purpose. What if clients don't believe they're creative? How many of you think you might not be creative? Two. Okay. So that's probably maybe 15% of people here. And I suggest that either somebody told you you weren't creative somewhere along the line, or you believe that creativity is incompatible with your life goals, which might be in the STEMs areas like science or math or engineering. Because I find when I talk to engineers that many of them believe they're not creative. But let me tell you this, that each of us performs literally hundreds of creative acts every day. You, by virtue of being a human being, are in possession of a creativity machine, and that is your brain. The way our brains have evolved allow and in fact predict that we will be creative. Think about this, for instance. When every sentence you utter is a creative act, because you're stringing words together, bits of information, in probably a novel way that, unless you're a politician that's using talking points all the time, you probably haven't strung them together in exactly that way before. So sentences that we utter when we're in conversation with each other are novel, and they're also adaptive because we're imparting information. Every time you use a common household object for a use that wasn't intended, such as propping a door open with a box, that's a creative act. So each of us performs hundreds of creative acts each day, and we all are creative. We all have the mental hardware to be creative. We have the ability to envision, which I'll talk about in a minute, hopefully, if my time doesn't run out. And we can use that to see things that don't yet exist. Creativity is different from talent. Talent is technical ability in a specific domain or endeavor. So when people say to me, oh, I'm not creative at all, I can't even draw a stick figure, I say, what you're saying is you're not talented in art. You're not saying that you're not creative. Again, creativity is the ability to combine elements in a novel way. The good thing to know is that creativity skills are transferable. What I'm going to talk about for the remainder of my time is a model that I've developed based on neuroscience research, and I've been working on this for about 13 years. And what we have found is that once you learn the basics of creative ideation, you can transfer them to any aspect of your life. Your business life, your personal life, your avocation. So they are transferable, and by virtue of that, very much worthwhile learning. Let's talk real quickly about the aspects of the creative process. The interesting thing about the creative process that I'm going to describe to you is that it was described many years ago. In fact, it was written in a 1926 book by Graham Wallace called The Art of Thought. And it was based on interviews and diaries that Wallace had read of creative luminaries from the past who were describing their creative process. So the first stage of the creative process is what we call preparation. And preparation has several sub-stages. The first is gathering general knowledge. Remember I told you that creativity is the ability to take bits of information and combine them and recombine them in novel and original ways. Well, hey, if you don't have any bits of information to combine, then you're not going to get very far. So general knowledge, learning broadly across many different areas, allows you to have this really rich internal repository of bits of information. The second thing you need is specific knowledge and skills in the particular area or domain of creativity in which you plan to be working. Could be art, music, mathematics, business, or interpersonal skills. And then you have to do what we call creative problem finding. You have to find some area to come up with a new idea. One suggestion that I give to people is that they make a list of things that annoy them. Okay, annoying things are really ripe for coming up with creative ideas. And let me give you an example. I talk about this in my book, Your Creative Brain, as well. George de Mestral, who was a Swiss engineer, came home from a hunting trip one day and found that both he and his dog were covered with burrs. He had them stuck all over his jacket, they were all over his dog, and this is a very annoying thing if you've ever had a dog that was covered with burrs. I used to have a Cocker Spaniel that lived in the water, and every day it would come home with these burrs, and you're just like, oh, please. But, okay, so rather than being annoyed, de Mestral became fascinated by the burrs, and he took one of those burrs and he put it under his microscope to see what made it so sticky. And what he found was that every burr had little hooks all over it like this. And he said, that's so interesting. How can I use that knowledge? And out of this came the invention of Velcro. Okay, so what I'm telling you is every annoying thing that happens in your life, if you can transform the way you think about it, instead of being annoyed, become fascinated by it, then it may be areas of creative problem finding. You then immerse yourself in the problem and hopefully come up with solutions. But if you cannot come up with solutions to your creative problem, then you put it on the back burner of your mind, right? And you incubate. After a certain period of incubation, and incubation means that you leave the problem alone and you go off and do something else. When you come back to your problem, or you may not come back to your problem, you may just be engaged in thinking about something else or not engaged in thinking about anything at all, and you have a sudden moment of insight or illumination. One of my subjects in a study I was doing, who was a songwriter whom you would all recognize, when I asked her about her creative process, I said, now how do you come up with the ideas for your songs and your songs? And she said, oh, I don't write my songs. The angels write them. And she said, every once in a while I can put up my antenna and pull in a song. And that's what creative insight feels like. It almost comes like it's coming from outside of you. But in fact, what's happening is areas of your brain below the level of conscious awareness continue to work on a problem, continue to look for pattern matches, and when something comes close enough to pattern matching, it feeds forward into conscious awareness, and we call that the moment of insight. Once you've come up with a creative idea, you have to evaluate it, see if it's suitable for pursuing. If it is, you elaborate on it, you flesh it out, and then finally you implement it. So these are basic steps of the creative process. Now here's the new neuroscience aspects of this. There are different brain activation patterns that are associated with these various stages of the creative process. And what you want to be able to do is to match your brain activation pattern to the stage of the process that you are currently in. What we found is that different brain sets facilitate different parts of this process. I call them brain sets, brain activation patterns, because they're like the biological equivalent of mindsets. And different mindsets change the way you see the world. Likewise, different brain activation patterns actually change your perception, your ability to recall, your memory recall, and the way you go about solving problems. So for instance, here are two different brain sets or brain activation patterns that are associated with the creative process. One is very heavily focused on left prefrontal dorsolateral cortex activation, and the other one shows a deactivation of that part of the brain and an activation of what we call the associational cortices, which are located at the junction of the temporal, parietal, and occipital lobes. Highly creative individuals switch between brain activation sets more easily when we look at them in the scanner. Can you learn to be more creative? Absolutely you can. And you can teach your clients to be more creative. Brain imaging studies indicate that highly creative people activate certain neural patterns when they're engaged in creative work, and that they flexibly change these patterns. And by learning to mimic these brain activation patterns of highly creative individuals, we can enhance our own creative abilities. Research indicates, because the brain is plastic, that we are very capable of learning to change our brain activation patterns. You see this through cognitive behavioral therapy, you see it through biofeedback, and you see it through cognitive retraining or cognitive rehabilitation. So I came up with, well, I shouldn't say I came up with, but after studying this for a number of years and trying to make sense of all the neuroscience that was occurring in the area of creativity in our labs as well as labs around the world, I came up with 7 different brain activation patterns that are associated with the creative process. And I don't have time to go through all of them right now, but what I want to focus on are a few that are associated in particular with generating creative ideas. And that would be the Kinect, the Envision, and the Absorb brain activation patterns or brain sets. The Absorb brain set is very much like what we heard from Dr. Chung, a state of mindfulness. The Absorb brain set is a state in which you are actively noticing new things in your environment without judging them. This non-judgmental state, this defocused state, allows you to be open to the universe, basically. Open to new ideas, open to fantasy, open to bringing more stimuli into the conscious workspace. And this brain activation state or brain set is actually the one that people are in when insights occur. You have to be in this defocused, non-judgmental brain state. The Envision brain state is a state in which you are thinking through mental images rather than verbally. If you think about it, and this is amazing to me, and the first time I ever held a human brain in my hands in a neuroanatomy class, I couldn't believe it when I looked at this 3-pound universe in my hands and realized that everything you see around you, from the clothes you're wearing, to the chairs you're sitting in, to the computer, to the screen, to the transportation that brought you here, all of it was once nothing more than a mental image inside somebody's brain. Your brain is capable of this. You can add to the world that we see around us. But you have to access this state and practice mental imagery. I'm sorry, I was going to do a visualization exercise, but I think we're very tight on time, aren't we? What? You want me to do it? Okay. All right, let's do that very quickly then. Please use the skills that Dr. Chung taught you and take a deep breath and let it out. Another deep breath, thinking about your breath, and let it out. And on the third breath, I want you to close your eyes and take a deep, cleansing breath. Focus on your breath, and if other thoughts come to mind, just gently push them away. With your eyes closed, continuing to breathe slowly, I want you to imagine that you are in a place where you have found relaxation and serenity in the past. This could be a place where you felt calm and at peace, a quiet beach, a mountain meadow, or a redwood forest, or the easy chair in your own living room. I want you to imagine your place of serenity now. In your mind's eye, turn in a 360-degree circle and see all that is around you. What do you see? What are you feeling? Can you feel the warm sun on your shoulders? A cool breeze against your face? Refreshing sea mist in your face? Cool grass beneath your feet? Imagine the feel of your serene place now. What are you hearing? Birdsong? The crying of gulls? The sound of the surf? A distant waterfall? Whatever the sounds are that are associated with your serene place, hear them now. What are you smelling? Fragrant flowers? The salty sea? The smell of pine? Fresh coffee brewing? Imagine the fragrances of your serene place now. And now, just enjoy the sights, the sounds, the smells of your serene place. Know that you can come to this place whenever you choose. Enjoy it for another moment. Seeing, hearing, smelling, and feeling the tranquil beauty around you. When you feel refreshed, take another deep breath and open your eyes. Okay, for those of you who are still feeling tranquil, open your eyes now. Okay, So that is just, we call that the mental holiday. And it's actually a little guided visualization that we made for our work that we are doing with returnees from Iraq and Afghanistan. You can actually go to my webpage, shelleycarson.com, and download an MP3 of that and a couple of other visualizations. But visualization is important, and so practice it. It may seem like it's it may seem like a silly thing to spend your time doing, but visualization has been shown by Einstein, by Michelangelo, by so many highly creative luminaries of the past as an important part of the creative process. Okay, and now nothing is happening. You know what? We were in such a serene place that the computer went to sleep. It literally is not doing anything. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the next one I want to tell you about very quickly is the Kinect Brainset. And this is a state which is a defocused state where you are able to make, where you're able to generate multiple solutions to creative problems and to see connections between bits of information that may be very remotely associated with each other. And one of the things that I hope you will do as you're leaving this conference today is think about all of the different concepts that you saw, that you heard about, and try to make connections between them. See the similarities, see the contrasts. And this act of seeing and making connections between things actually changes your brain. It physically changes your brain. And as a contrast to this, we'll think real quickly about the Reason Brainset. This is a state of focused attention in which you are consciously and deliberately thinking about goals and the steps it takes to achieve them. It's also a part of the creative process that is very important. This is probably a state that most of your clients will already be very good at because basically we spend a great deal of our lives learning how to be good reasoners and how to think rationally. But another takeaway message for today is not only that you want to learn to access these different brain activation states, and by the way, most people have a brain state that is most comfortable to them. I call that your mental comfort zone. So what you want to help clients do is stretch out of that mental comfort zone and try to enter some of these other brain activation states. And then the next message that you want to give to them is the importance of flexibly switching between states. Because the creative process, regardless of what you are doing, whether it's in art, science, business, or your own personal life, involves switching between multiple brain sets. And the more easily you can do this, the more creative you are going to be and the more creative solutions you're going to generate. So being able to switch between a defocused and a highly focused state of mind, attentional state, is very important. So the take-home messages for today: creativity is important. You can enhance your own natural creative abilities by learning to access these brain activation patterns or brain sets that it's been demonstrated highly creative people use more often than those of us who are less creative. You can match your brain set to the stage of the creative process that you are currently in. And consequently, if you're having trouble changing brain states or brain activation patterns, then try to do the part of the creative process that matches the brain state you're currently in. Learn to move flexibly among these brain sets as well. I have in the slides that you have a few pointers on establishing an environment of creativity in your coaching work and in your personal life. And the most important one is never quit learning. Intellectual curiosity is one of the foundations of creative work. So try to learn broadly and across many different interests. Increase your exposure to good creative work And let me skip down to this one. Turn down the volume on the sensor in your brain. That sensor is there for good reason. It helps us to make snap decisions between good and evil, friend and foe, and it's very important for our survival, but it's not very good for generating creative ideas. So try to turn the sensor down in your brain, and that allows more information that is being generated in the rear parts of your brain to feed forward into conscious awareness. Scheduling time for solitude is really, really important. We need time to digest and to contemplate if we are going to arrive at creative insights. Savor your environment, as Dr. Chung has taught us, and please unplug your electronic devices for at least a certain portion of every day. When you are focused on this little screen and the thumbs are going like this, there is no time for digestion and contemplation. Two other points that I think are important. Do spend time in places of natural beauty. Places of natural beauty naturally defocus the attention, which again is going to loosen those cognitive filters that keep information that is being processed in the rearward parts of your brain from feeding forward into conscious awareness. And finally, spend time with other creative individuals, because creative ideas tend to cross-pollinate and cross-fertilize. And that's exactly what you are doing at today's conference. So let me leave you with one of my favorite quotes about creativity from Franklin Delano Roosevelt's inaugural address. Happiness lies not in the mere possession of money. It lies in the joy of achievement and the thrill of creative effort. Thank you all very much. I invite you all to write to me with ways that you've been able to incorporate creativity into your coaching practices. And I do have a list of references for further reading that are in your books. Thank you.